Okay, you guys. Hi. I'm Betty, and I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Betty.
I'm not at all pleased with having to listen to my self-feedback from this. What do? I want to avoid the feedback. Is that better?
That's a better view.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. I hope you all get a chance to stand out here and look at yourselves, because I know when you get called on, you just get up here and pitch, find a face, and you need to be up here and look at yourselves. And it makes me cry every time I think about it. Because I remember my first New Year's Eve party sober. It was my second one sober. I've been sober a year. And my sponsor and his wife and the gang said that my husband and I needed to go out and celebrate. And they took us to Disneyland Hotel, which would only allow sober alcoholics to party there. And I was scared to death. I was a great dancer drinking, but I wasn't much of a dancer sober. And here was this, like 700 people, all dressed up and gorgeous. And I was dressed up, I know, but I was so scared. And I said, is everybody here sober? And they said, everybody here is sober. And there was a great big fountain of punch, just big, that went like this. All I could think of is, oh my God, what if somebody slipped a little gin in there? What would happen to this hotel? And so we got through that night, but being in a group of sober alcoholic men and women is so powerful that you're just gorgeous. I've been coming here to Salt Lake City since, what year did you come back?
86.
86. Becky came back in 1986.
No, not 86.
Whenever the heck she came back. She came back sometime. You weren't even sober in 86, were you? Marijuana maintenance. She did that for a while. It was really something. By the way, I am Betty Allison, and the reason I say that is just exactly, I love what you said, Jennifer, and I love that you brought up that story that I'd forgotten about. Let's not be too anonymous. And I also identified with the rest of it because I had a buddy that I was just close to my heart. I just loved him to pieces. We were like brothers and sisters. You know how you get in here? And he was in the hospital. And I go to the hospital and I wanted to see, and all I knew was Shorty, and I stood there like an idiot. And thank God it was a little hospital, and I said, you got a room where a whole lot of people are showing up and running in? And she said, yes, 12B. And from that time on, I thought, I don't want to get lost. I want you to be able to find me. I need you wherever I am. So I will show you so you don't have to wonder what the heck she's doing up here. When I got here, I was blaming everybody for everything because that's what a good drunk does. And then you taught me I had to start taking responsibility. But I've been sober a while, so I quit taking responsibility, and I'm back to blaming anybody I can, anytime I can. So I have notes. And because Father Tom said it was a really good idea, and he's going to be here the 18th, and so if you don't like it, go tell on me. It's all his fault. This is probably about the best thing that ever happened to me. I was thinking about that, and I thought, is that really true? I have a friend who always says that when he speaks. And it really isn't completely 100% true, because the best thing that ever happened to me from my whole heart, from as long as I could remember, was having children. I got 4 of them. And I'm an alcoholic, born to an alcoholic mother. Not a pretty sight. And like a little girl, I really, really loved my mother, and us little girls want our mothers a lot. And the little boys want their mothers too. And mine was a really bad alcoholic, probably from the time she was 16 or 17 or 18 years old, and she progressed rapidly into some of the worst degradations and scenes that I have ever heard of or that I have ever witnessed. And I witnessed a lot of them. They were pretty bad. And time passed, and because of her alcoholism, I was shifted around. I was an only child. It's a darn good thing I couldn't have taken care of two of us. But I was shifted around a lot, and the people I was shifted around to weren't necessarily related, nor did they necessarily know each other. Lots of times it was family, but it would be a few months here, 8 months there, seldom a year. And I had been in 22 schools by the time I was in 7th grade, and I had lived with probably that many or more families, one way or another. So I didn't have history, and history is a big deal when you're sober up and you try to take an inventory, because there's been stories told about you, and you've got them, and you eventually put them together. And I didn't have this. So I also didn't have a lot of things that go with that. But as I got into my own drinking, well, we left Montana. Montana's my home place. We left Montana because of my mother's drinking and hit California with one of her husbands. She had like about 8 altogether. And I also used all those names. So I'd move back to a town, they'd known me as Barclay, and then I'd come back as Brown, and then I'd show up as Holmberg, and and then you try, and these are little towns, you try to make sense of it, and finally you just kind of give it up, and oh, well, the hell with it. So let them figure it out. These things really didn't bother me, since they were a part of my life and what I grew up with, at least as I recognized it at the time. But it didn't take a whole long time for me to find out that they really bothered other people. So as the years passed and people would get to being really critical of my drinking, I'd drag out these sad, pitiful stories. They'd get off my back. I'd go get another bottle. It was cool for a while. When we went to California with one of these guys, it was 1940, and I was a little girl. And my stepdad, he was a really nice guy, and he traveled a lot. And my mother got into another level of her alcoholism and was working some of the swinging bars in the Hollywood area. And they were fairly well-known bars. 7C's downtown LA, and Vagabond Isle out in Hollywood. And the guy that owned these places also was involved in Bob's Big Boy and all that stuff that went on in those days. And my mother was always getting drunk and getting mouthy, and there also were a lot of the, it became the big mob after a while, but there some of those guys hanging around in these bars. And she got pretty mouthy, and we heard the screeching of tires at a door slam, and the car pulled away from the curb, and we go out and watch my mother, badly beat up, crawling up the porch steps to get into the house, swollen, beat up, angry, and profane. And these things kind of impact you when you're a kid. But they didn't impact me too doggone much, because I noted them. And then I moved back to Montana again. We did all this stuff. War broke out, send the kids back to Montana, all this kind of stuff, did that. And in a short time, I was 16, and I got on my very first alcoholic drunk. Not my first drink. I don't count the first drinks. If you live in Montana, you have your first drink when you cut your teeth. And you have a little dandelion wine, you have a little home brew, you have a little this, that. It kind of comes with the territory. But when I was 16, it was VE Day, or VJ Day, whichever one it was, in August. And we all went out to one of the guys' farms. We drank dandelion wine, we ate carrots, and we drank beer, and I got drunk, and we went into town, and they all went in to have hamburgers, and I threw up the carrots outside the car door. I couldn't go in, and that was the beginning of the whole thing. And I never quit. I never had 30 days without a drunk from that day forward. And along with that, I knew that I would never be like my mother, because I'm a lady after all. And I forgot all the ugliness, I forgot all the scenes, I forgot all that stuff, and I said, yeah, but I'm different. I could hardly wait to get in that bottle. So I got in it, had a really good time, and enjoyed it, and it was what I always wanted it to be. But what happened immediately is that the good grades that I had in school, I barely graduated, and it was a shock to everybody because I was one of those good students. It was a shock to me too. But I remember having that little thought, well, they ought to know that I know all this stuff. They've had me here long enough. And the thinking was always there, you should make an exception for me. Don't you understand? My case is different. Started that young. I don't think it ever changed. Not too sure it's changed today. Sorry, Charlie, but that's how it was. Back to California. I had to get away from those people in that little town, Cutbank, Montana, by name, because they were calling me a drunk. Can you imagine? I had a few little episodes in that area. I went with a guy who was in college over in Missoula, and the big deal at the end of the year was always to meet everybody up at the park in Glacier. And I wanted to go up there and meet my boyfriend. I didn't have a car. My ex-boyfriend had a car, and I thought he ought to drive me. And he did. But he didn't plan on delivering me to the new boyfriend. And I was, you know, I got pretty annoyed with him, and I finally stuck my lit cigarette on his nose to get his attention, and he did drop me off. His nose was swollen up like this and everything. But little things like that, and I always said they don't count. You don't understand. It was his fault. Everything was always somebody else's fault. Thus, I get to California, and I get myself, I had jobs, I had good jobs, and it was great. It was great to be able to go to bars and liquor stores and not know anybody, and not have them running around carrying the message of where they saw you last, and what you were doing and who you're doing it with. I thought it was great, and I thought I earned it, and I was entitled, and I had my own jobs, and I bought my own booze, and it was nobody's business. And I finally met my first husband there. We were young folks and drinking, and everybody was drinking. It was Second World War was over, and he had been in that in the South Pacific. And we married, and we had 3 children. And it was a real romance. I loved that guy, and I loved his family. He had 2 brothers and a dad. His mother died when he was 13. His father had remarried a really neat lady. And I just felt kind of complete with these people. I'm kind of a family-oriented people, and I really liked them. So there we were. I'm a drunk. His dad's a drunk. Everybody else drinks a little bit every time we get together. You know the drill. And so we had these 3 kids, and Ray got a pilot's license. By now we lived in Buena Park. And in this period of time, through these years, you know, there's a longing in an alcoholic. We don't always recognize the longing. In my case, the longing was something to live by. I didn't define it, but I wanted some kind of structure. And as a result of my new mother-in-law and other people I'd met in my life, these people all seemed to be the ones that I was attracted to were Catholic people. So I was very, very attracted to that. And I eventually joined the Catholic Church with my husband's permission. He was not a Catholic, because there are a lot of rules and regulations there. And this was very, very important to me, and I had a lot of blessings came to me as a result of my activity in this church. Sobriety was not one of them. It was a good faith to pick because it was okay to drink if you were Catholic. Priest drank, everybody drank, we'd have parties. And in Buena Park, Ray went off one day on his, anyway, had all this thing going, and I was involved in a mission. It was called Mission at the Church, and I was involved in some special private prayer stuff. And the reason I mention this is because it ties in with the 3rd step I later did in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I had a happy, a love-filled relationship with a God of my understanding and this whole thing. There was a great deal of joy in it, a great deal of faith in it, and I'm still a drunk. So while all this was going on, there was, as I said, this mission, and because of my husband's job at the time, I could take the car, go to Mass at 6 o'clock in the morning, get back, and he could take the car, and I was doing this every day for 6 weeks as a part of this little special thing I was doing. It was very important to me. On the final day, which was Sunday, the women's ended and the men's would begin at noon. My sweet husband came in, and he was going to go out to, our children were 6, almost 3, and 10 months. He was going to go do some more touch-and-go landings. He was ready for his pilot's license. He had done his solos, he had done his cross-country, he had done these things. And so he came in and he kissed me goodbye. The kids were taking a nap, and he said, I will be back and we'll go for a ride at Rolling Hills Estates. And I thought, that's a strange thing to say. You don't take 3 kids and go to Rolling Hills Estates. And then he came back and again kissed me on the cheek, and he said, thanks for making it so easy for me. And he left, and about 2 hours later, the community was filled with sirens that didn't quit. They went on and on and on, and these 2 planes had collided in midair, burst into flames, and dropped to the ground in the backyard of a home in Buena Park. And this was mushed itself around with my spiritual life, the fact that it happened at that moment, that I had finished this 6-week special prayer time. And for whatever reason, it didn't make me have a lack of faith. It made me have a deep feeling inside that I would one day understand this. It didn't change the grief, it didn't end the grief, this is what happened. So we went through all that stuff. I'm still a drunk. Doctors say, I think this girl ought to have this as a terrible shock. This young woman needs to have a little pill. Gave me some Valium. I didn't like them. They scared me. I didn't like what they did for me. I know a lot of you don't understand that, but I didn't like what they did for me. And Alan Ladd had just died of alcohol and drugs, pills. So I called the doctor and I said, these pills make me feel separate from my responsibilities to these children. I'm so upstanding. I mean, I'm telling you, I'm so upstanding. And I said, but a little beer helps me sleep really well. I always said a little beer. I never had more than 2 drinks in my entire life, you understand? And the doctor said, what a good idea. So from that day forward, I had the doctor's blessing. Somehow or another, I figured I had God's blessing. I had everybody's blessing. I just justified everything I did. And had no money as a result of this accident, was not a wealthy widow. But I knew how to do a lot of stuff, and so I did it, took care of the kids. Now I've got another one. If I'm buying my own booze, you don't get to criticize me. So now the little widow lady is drunk, and people are saying they don't like it that I'm drunk because they like me. But on the other hand, I've just gone through this devastation, and so now they're making more excuses like it's no wonder. And inside my innermost self, I knew the truth. And I knew that my drinking was not escalating because of Ray's death. It was escalating before he died. They hadn't seen it. If they wanted to use it, I'd help them. But I knew my truth. I'm an alcoholic, and I wasn't going to let go of that bottle, and nothing was going to take it away from me. So I had myself some more drinking time, and a couple years later, I married a guy who was looking for a family. And he got me and my 3 kids. And they always said how much money he made the day he got married because he had all these tax deductions that fast. And I was generous, told you that I was a kind and charitable good woman. And I let this man help raise my kids and pay for us all. He had been a swinging bachelor. Now he's got 3 kids and a wife, and she's a lush at that. And he didn't know that, but see, this guy had never seen me sober, but he didn't know it. Because I met him at a singles club that my aunt went to, and I'd go there and on Saturday nights because I loved dancing, and I'd drink and I'd dance and I'd go home, and then I would finish getting drunk at home because after all, I'm a lady. And so this guy marries me, tickled pink to marry me. He's introduced me to his boss's wife, the whole crew. they think, isn't he a lucky man to have this lovely little widow lady and 3 children? And I said, yes, he was. So in 6 weeks, he packed his bags to leave me because he didn't at all like the lush he found himself connected with. And I don't know how come I was able to talk him out of leaving. I have no idea. He didn't have any idea either. But I talked him out of leaving. And about 5 years after that, in Long Beach, I talked him into making a move because I told him that the people in this neighborhood would never let him be the father of these children. We must move. Well, we had to move because I was such a damn drunk. And I had to get him away from there before people started talking. And I moved him down the road to Long Beach. And I had learned a lot. I learned not to stay involved with the church and the school because I smelled so bad. You'd smell me from out here. I reeked of alcohol. I weighed about 96, 7 pounds. And I did all the work there was to do. And it would get done. And those kids would have their birthday dinner. By gosh, it was burned, but I wasn't like my mother. They had their birthday dinner. I couldn't be in bars anymore, which I just absolutely loved. I still like bars, I want to tell you that. But I don't drink in them. But I had to stay home now and drink. I had become a so-called hidden alcoholic. I wasn't hidden from those 4 precious children, I want you to know, but I'm now a hidden alcoholic. I thought I had control of my drinking. You know, you get sober in AA, there's a thing called the Jellinek chart. And it tells about the progression of alcohol. It tells how it changes and how you go through these stages of denial and how you think you are when you aren't. And I thought that I was still in control of the beginning of my drinking. And this man and I had a child. We had a little boy. And the other kids were older and they were in school, and I'm smart enough to know and I care enough about children to want him to have children in his life. And at the Pan American Park, you could take your little children up there, and if you donated 2 days a week. And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, now Sunday night I'm drunk, and Monday I'm too sick to drink. I'll volunteer on Tuesday. Tuesday night I'm drunk. Wednesday I'm too sick to drink. I'll volunteer on Thursday. I got Tuesday and Thursday. And I was always terribly impressed with my brilliance. And so I go up here to the school to help take care of the children. And I'm drunk, and I was still drunk from last night. And I kind of made it up there, and I kind of be like, and I thought, I think I smell a little bit. I think I'll have a little cough drop. And I tried the menthol. The menthol were the strongest things that I could possibly find. And so I'd be sucking on these. My eyeballs are red. My little double thin face is puffy. And you get kind of red. And I was a big fan of cheap Red Mountain. There was always Jack Daniels and some really good cognac in this. We never, you know, when we did additions to that house, I made sure that they put a place for appliances here. I always wanted my own bar. God, I wanted my own bar so bad. My husband would never let me have it. I don't know why. So the booze was all in a cupboard up there, and I'd get this cheap Red Mountain wine or whatever else I buy by the case, gallons, 4 gallons in this case, if you like that. And so your tongue gets purple, your teeth get purple, it's like that. But being the clever woman I am, before I went to the dentist, I would go to white wine for about 3 weeks, so my mouth... I didn't want to offend this dentist who thought so highly of me and my children. So I did all this stuff. And in the meantime, my husband can't stand it. He's not telling me we're being at these parties. He's not telling me anymore that we're being invited. I'm going through these things. He'd go to bed at 9:30, had to get up early in the morning, and I learned, I was wearing contact lenses, and I learned a whole lot of things. I was really careful drinking. I liked looking good at all times. And so I had pretty bathrobes. And I would put my bathrobe on about 7:30, and I would take my contact lenses out about 8:30, because if you forget them, your eyes swell up. And if you don't get that bathrobe on and you don't get to bed, people think you're drunk if they wake up and find you on the couch with your clothes on. It doesn't look good. And that guy was my source of bottle income. It's very important to keep things going. So I worked hard. So I'm out in this living room, and I tell you, I'd made the prettiest house. You can't believe how pretty it was. The prettiest place. And it really was. So I'm out in the living room drunk, and I fall off and hit myself on this chow table, and blood just spurts every place. And I stagger into, got a good looking bathrobe though. I stagger into the bathroom. The kids' bathroom was on that part of the house. And flipped on the light. And in the mirror was a bloated face, blood splashing, and my frightened daughter's face reflected in that mirror with me. And I saw my mother, and I saw me, and I said, I'll never turn on the light again. And that was my answer. And I always said, if I get like my mother, I'll quit drinking. But I just found another way to hide it. And so I'd hide it some more. And that continued like that. I remember a day, you know, and that kid I was trying to take care of, that lasted 2 weeks. I was drunk every night. I didn't have 2 nights a week. I was drunk every night. That began, I had been daily drunk for a while now, and I didn't know it. So we had ourselves some more time. And finally, one night, Christmas Eve, somebody made a mistake. My husband wasn't able to keep it from me that there was a party going on. They called me instead of telling him. And we went over to the party. And I was in pretty bad shape, and I knew that I could not drink at this party. And I was pretty sure that I could make it if I had a drink before I left. And I got to that party, and I was dressed like $7 million, and because I thought if I could see myself looking good, I might behave better. Always thought that. Never meant anything, but I always thought that. And I looked in that, I felt I just have a little drink with a lot, and just have a little drink. I really had to have a little drink. And within something like 10 minutes, I could feel my body swelling, and it scared me. And I went to the bathroom and looked, and I was just getting all bloated and red and swollen. And my heart started racing, and I was scared to death. And I couldn't quit drinking. We went home early, and I drank, and I drank, and I drank, and I drank. And somewhere in the morning of the 27th of December, I called a woman that had been brought to my house some years before because they wanted her to stay sober, and they thought bringing her to my house would help us. The day they brought her, I put my booze up in the cupboard, hoping she wouldn't stay too long. But, she and I never drank together, but she lived in my new neighborhood. And she came over to my house, and I called her at 4 in the morning, and she came, and she knew the way to Alcoholics Anonymous. Strangely enough, she wasn't a sober alcoholic, but she had been sent to AA once. And she came in, and she couldn't believe what she was looking at. I was such a mess. And she asked all the usual dumb questions that non-alcoholics ask. She said, "Are you and Richard having a fight?" And I screamed at her the best that I could. I said, "I'm an alcoholic. Can't you see what you're looking at?" And she asked a lot of other questions, and I was finally just screaming at her. "I'm an alcoholic. I can't quit." And she stayed, and she made coffee, and I was hallucinating people and the Christmas tree and DTs and animals, and I had acrobatic mice on my table. Buddha belly, fat, alcoholic mice, little acrobatic mice. And she stayed for a while. She made some coffee and gave me this coffee. This is the dumbest thing I ever had anybody do in my entire life. And I said, "Float some booze in it, you ought to know better." So she did. And she came back, she left me, and I continued with DTs. Somewhere around 8 in the morning, she came back. She had made a call to a place called Little House. They didn't call them Detox then, this was Little House. It was in Bellflower, California. And there was a question. They had a bed, and they said, "You must ask her if she has a desire to be sober." Swear to God, that's a whole language. And she came to, I was now passed out, had been passed out in my bedroom. And the door was shut, and she came in there, and of course I looked pretty bad. And we could hear my daughter knocking at the door. She wanted to see her mother. And my friend was afraid to let her see me because I looked so bad. And I knew that she needed to see me because I've been there, done that. I know that whole story. And so I said, let her in, and she came in. And I said, I'm very, very sick, and I'm going to go to this place with Babs. And honey, when I come back, we'll play those games that I can never play with you. And if you're a parent, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we went down the road. And that road in Long Beach was a very green road. There was a lot of greenery and a lot of trees and a lot of everything on that street, Clark Street, at that time. And it was gravel gray, and what I learned later, I had no color. I had lost all color. It's called alcoholic color blindness, and I had that. And I'd had space distortion that was pretty bad, along with these kinds of DSTs that I had. And we got down there to this little house and knocked on the door. It was a little 2-bedroom house that had been put together with money out of the pockets of Al-Anon and alcoholics, and a pot, a pan, and a couple of sheets, and because they said there are women who need a place to get sober that can't put 24 hours together. So there was nobody said, are you sober? They just said, you want to be sober. And all these people were sober in the programs. So they opened the door, and this teeny, teeny, tiny little lady, teeny, tiny, all wrinkled up little lady, came and put her hand on my arm, and she said, this girl's sick, let's put her to bed. And I'm in a bathrobe, pretty bathrobe. My family bought me the most gorgeous bathrobe you ever saw. They always thought if they dressed me up and I looked good, I'd behave better. It never worked. But they didn't give up. So she touched me, and I, that touch, I can feel it to this day from that woman. And she said, this girl's sick, let's put her to bed. And they took me in and put me to bed. And I did all the dumb things that somebody in withdrawals does, and crossed my hands upon my breast and said, call the priest. Thanks be to God, they were sober alcoholics and they knew better. But you do the withdrawal stuff, you do all that, and the hots and the sweats and the flashes and all that stuff. And I stayed there for 10 days. And the rules were that you have to go to a meeting every day. So a woman showed up and she said, well, she didn't have any clothes. I just got a bathrobe. Nobody could put clothes together, it was too hard. So she said, aha, I know where there's a women's meeting in somebody's apartment. I'll take her there. For the December 27th was my first meeting in Alcoholics Anonymous. I was still drunk. And it started there. So I was there for 10 days. In that 10-day time, these men and women said things like, remember this drunk and shaking it out. Remember it. Take time every single day to relive this, because this is the foundation that you're going to build for your sobriety for the rest of your life if you want it. And so I thought I was supposed to, so I did. And I think I was supposed to. I think that's exactly what I was supposed to do. And I tell you, it's true that every day for 365 days, I took time to think through that last drunk, me and now my mind and body, and shaking it out in that house, and the DTs, and no clothes, and scared children. And it doesn't take that long, maybe 90 seconds, to do that. In the second year, I probably did it several times a week. But it's burned in the consciousness of my mind. I know my alcoholic story. I don't forget it. I know it very, very, very well. So the beginning of the first step was in that little house, because it started with that. And it started with, before I left there, somebody said something about, you need to kind of track the progression. Today they call it timeline. You need to kind of track the progression of your run with alcohol. And that kind of made sense, so I kind of did that. And then they did things, I did strange things. They put this little plate, there was always a little plate. You'd come wander into the kitchen, a little plate like this, little pieces of cheese and crackers on it, little bites. Because sober alkies know that drunks can't eat. We can't look at plates full of food. And so you find yourself, when you can't eat, having a little piece of cracker, a little piece, and that's the first part. That's the beginning of halt. Don't get too hungry, too tired, too lonely, too thirsty, too tight, all that. So they started doing this for me in this house, and then they would remind me to do it. So they began to put the responsibility on my shoulders for my sobriety, my physical sobriety, immediately by that second and third day. Immediately. I am so grateful to them. Then I went on from there and I said, well, we had no radios, no TVs. You had nothing in the little house but books of literature of the Alcoholics Anonymous and 24-hour book from Hazleton. And we did that every day. And then we went to a meeting every day. And I was the only one there. There was one person when I came in and she left. And I was all alone between Christmas and New Year's in this place, getting sober right after New Year's. On the 5th day, I was in a meeting. You know, I was desperate when I got here, and the great gift, I think, is desperation. And because if I had got here 6 months before, I would have been picking who I listened to. I would have wanted to hear good English. You got to look right, you got to smell right, and you got to do all these things, because I'd have still had those categories going. By the time I got here, I was willing to listen to anybody who could tell me anything that might give me some level of safety in not drinking again. And I got to this meeting, and this little Chicano guy, he was about 21 years old, comes up and he shakes my hand really like this, and he looks me straight in the eyes and he says, "Hello, my name is Larry. I'm glad to meet you. I bet you were pretty when you were young." And I fell in love right that minute. And this guy had 6 months of sobriety, and he had hit the streets at such a young age with alcohol and with wine and with pills that I mean, he had a good family, but he couldn't hardly put a sentence together that you could figure out. And in time, 6 months or so later, he kind of became my running buddy. And I couldn't understand a lot of things he said, but I could understand his face. And he ended up spending a lot of time at my house. And his sponsor became my sponsor. And my sponsor was a Skid Row drunk. He slept in the flood-controlled tunnels in Wilmington before he got sober. And he had been sober 4.5 years when he got me. You can tell God wasn't smiling on him that day. And there was a party going on at their house, and all these people liked my husband, and so we were invited to the party. My husband drank, and he drank all of his life. And out we go to this place and think they were celebrating Larry's birthday. And I had picked up the phone. That drunk mother I told you I had, when did we shut this down?
We started at 8:15, started at 9:15.
Okay. So that drunk mother I had disappeared quite a few years before. I had separated myself and my children from her because I didn't want my kids to be around a drunk. You understand? And she was being declared dead. They had contacted me some years before to take an inheritance, and I wouldn't touch it because I was too broke. And I knew what she was like, and she would show up and I'd be stuck with her because I would have spent her damn money, so I wouldn't touch her. And so all these years later, I married this guy, and she was being declared dead in the courts, had to get a lawyer, because they'd said to me, you know, Betty, we're going to turn this over to the state, and I wasn't allowed to do anything else with it. I said, okay, I got a husband now, he's got some money, he's got a job, I can take this. So this was taking place, and I was almost 6 months sober. Phone rings, I pick it up, my mother's on the other end. And that was a crisis, because what I didn't know is that I believed that she had the power to get me drunk. I didn't know I had that, but got the shakes pretty bad. So we end up at this party, and then at 8 o'clock there's an AA meeting. And a small group of people that I'd been with from that very first Wednesday, my first Wednesday sober, I'd been with these people, and I felt safe with them. There was Rosie Rios, and there was Larry, and there was John Caven, and there was Maxie Collier and his wife, and my sponsor and his wife, and I was safe. So I told this story. And I didn't have an official sponsor because I didn't know what the hell that was. I thought it was the woman who took me to Little House, who wasn't sober in AA. And one of the guys said, I gotta wonder at the person who don't think they don't need no damn sponsor. He was from Oklahoma. And I understood what these people were saying. They're trying to get my attention. They're trying to pull my covers, and I got it, but I didn't have anything for them to reach, so there was no connection. So I told this story, and I was scared. And I could tell that these people were connected with each other. They had friendship, they had confidence, they had trust. And I'm looking out there, and I've been to 6 months of meetings, and I'm looking and I'm saying it isn't any different. I'm still on the outside looking in, and I'm not like them. And now I've got questions because I've been here for 6 months, and my mind said, did you come here to be understood? And my mind said, no, I came here to be sober. And I said, these people are friends, and I'm not friends with them. And the question was, did you come here for friendship? And the answer was, no, I came here to be sober. What did I know about friendship? December 27th, nothing. And I said, so this is the power work. And then I said, and are you sober? And you bet I was. I was absolutely sober. And I had begun a 12-step program. And on the way home, one of the guys had said to me before we left there, he said, you know, it was tall, skinny Johnny Caven, who was friends with Brent, by the way. They were really good friends. And he says, doll. I thought it was because he thought I was cute. I found out he called all women doll because he couldn't remember any names. And he said, you need a sponsor. And the unspoken part is if you're going to stay sober. So I told my husband, I said, you know, that guy said I need a sponsor. And he said, well, what about Rosie? We'd had her with us. And I said, I don't know how I knew what I knew, but I knew that she couldn't help me where I was now. And I said, Johnny Edwards, this low-bottom, skinny, low-bottom, snobbish drunk. I said, he could help me. And he said, well, then go ask him. And I said, he said he doesn't sponsor women. He said, well, go ask him anyway. And this is how God works in my life, because I would never have done that on my own. Am I going to be rejected? No, I'm not going to be rejected. But Richard said, and he said very little. And so he was God's messenger that day. And I went back and asked this man, and he said yes. He and his wife came to my house. They sat down around the famous round table that's in my house that I keep, and proceeded to lay out the conditions by which he would sponsor a woman. And we sat there, and I told my sad, pitiful story about my mother, and I have told it so many times over the years that I could tell it easy. I never had any emotion. I just delivered this little story. I didn't, you know, cross my legs because your foot might jiggle and they might know. So I kept my feet flat on the floor. I didn't hold anything in my fingers. I forgot to read my paper, sorry. I let God direct this one time, and he never let me get sober, so I never let him direct it again. So I'm sitting there, and we all used matches to smoke cigarettes in those days, you know, and I'm sitting there telling this quiet story. My feet are on the floor, my hands are very quiet. But I'm sober 6 months. I'm looking at these matches, and I'm wanting to peel those matches. I want to do something with my fingers. I wanted to peel those matches. I could hear it in my mind. And I said, don't touch them because they'll know. And I was still in that survival of don't let anybody know that you're upset, that there's got a problem, that you got anything. I got that old mask going, and that thing is still going from the bar days. Guess what? The little wino over there knew. And he nailed me. And he said, when he finally heard this whole story that I told him the story, how this guy that she had been with had been in AA and he'd got drunk and it was all her fault because that's what it looked like. And he nailed me, and he got this big, and his voice boomed out there, and he said, you think you don't have a resentment. You hate that woman so bad you'd rather have her dead than alive. And it popped something inside of me. It's like there's a big old pus bag that's been growing there all those years of drinking, and it popped. And my husband was doing like she's doing. He's just laughing his head off over here. And he's laughing from nervousness because they'd been living with a dry drunk. They'd been waiting for me to pick up a drink, this family of mine, walking on eggshells. And that guy cracked me wide open, and what I felt inside was safety. I thought, oh my God, I'm safe. Somebody knows. Nobody had ever been able to reach me, not ever. No priest, no doctor, no great friend. Nobody had ever reached me until that little low-bottom wino did. And that gave me a chance. And he said, you've been here 6 months. You know better than to think anybody can get you drunk. Nobody can get you drunk without your complete agreement. You have to take the drink, you have to put it in your mouth, it's on you. And that was the end of that, honey. And from that day forward, what I knew is that it's my responsibility to know what's going in my belly, and let me tell you what I know. And I don't put alcohol in my system. Along with all that, those people back there in that first 10 days, is you got to ask this power greater than yourself to help you to stay sober every morning. Doesn't matter what you understand or feel. Nobody cares around here. And at night you say thank you to that same power. And in between, you eat and you make these phone calls, and that's on you. So I'd make the phone calls and they'd say, when did you eat last? And I explain I'm not hungry. And they'd say, we don't care. We're not listening. Get something to eat and come back to the phone. And that's how I got sober. And I understood after I'd been sober for a while, because you guys are nuts. You're really wacky. So when the girls call me, I say, when did you eat last? And it doesn't take very long before they say, I already did that, and I've got my paper and pencil. And that's how we do the drill. But with this guy that day, and then we get into the steps. And one of the first things this beautiful man taught me was that he said, you got to look at that 5th chapter. Got to look pretty hard at that. And he said there, because he heard this story about me and my religious spiritual life. And he knew that people like me were in real danger because we thought we had our God concept in place. And he said the 5th chapter says very, very clearly in there, let go of your old ideas. It does not say old, bad ideas. Because I heard a lot of you talk about hellfire and damnation. No wonder you had to give up the God you had. I would too if I had yours. But John said, the 5th chapter says, let go of your old ideas. And he said that means everything. And you ask the God of your understanding to whatever power you believe in, please God, help me let go of any ideas that I think I know about you. And let me be open to let you build it in me. And he said, if some of the old stuff comes back, sober Betty, you'll know you can trust it. And he sat at that table that night, he said, this man, now I told you who I am, not really much. And I didn't have a college education, and I didn't do a lot of traveling, and I didn't do a lot of things, but I did the routine stuff. This man had been a journalist before he got on the skids. He'd been around the world 3 times. He had disarmed live ammunition when he was in the Navy, and he had been 7 years in the skids. And this man said, when anything happens to me, I say to myself, John, have you done this sober? And he said, if the answer is no, I know nothing about it. And I took that in, and I knew that now would be another one of my stories. And I wouldn't have known it otherwise because I was so arrogant. I had nothing to be arrogant about, but I was arrogant. And I think that's the story of a lot of us. So what I know is if I haven't done it sober, I don't know anything about it. And that's an ongoing life thing. It doesn't end with being sober 5 or 6 or 7 years. It goes on and it goes on and it goes on. When I was widowed in 1999, in February, that beautiful husband of mine had had cancer for 3 years. And when it came time to do some of the hard stuff that we were going to have to do, he had come to trust me. I had become a person of trust through these 12 steps and following some directions. And he said, the things I was going to have to do with him were going to be rough because the medications he had to take were going to be personality changing. And we sat down and we did inventory together. And we did some talking, and we made some plans about how we were going to handle these situations when they came up. And that helped us get through that period of time. We wouldn't have known that without a 12-step program and without other people who shared with us what they did. Everybody shares. So we did those things. And when Richard died, which was February 11th, he died 3 years exactly after the day that he was diagnosed. He was cognizant of his life and his times. He was aware that his family was with him. He was part of the planning of what took place. We, as a family, were a part of all this together because the people in Alcoholics Anonymous in that very first year had reached out not just for me, but for the children. That 6 months visit, my sponsor and his wife sat at the table. The kids were there, my husband was there, and before they left, I didn't know this, or I'd have sure put a stop to this. They didn't let me do anything. They gave my kids their phone number, and they said, if she gives you any trouble, call us. And they did. They were there for those kids. We were in and out of their houses, and they shared with us the lengths that they'd had to go to keep a marriage together, to hang on to their kids, to go through troubles, to do all this kind of stuff. So when it was Richard's time, and we all stood around, I had said to him, is it all right with you? He was non-Christian. He had his own spiritual life. I honored his, and he honored mine, and we all honored each other's. And I said, is it okay with you if I smudge you when you're going out? And he said, yeah. I said, is it okay with you if I told him some of the things I wanted to do, and he said yes. And the family was there together, and I had been taught from some really good people in the program a lot of things about forgiveness and love and all these things that kind of put life together. And one of the things I was taught was about release, and we gathered around the bed and we gave Richard back his energies and we took ours. It was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever been in my life. And we were all a part of this. We talked together, we laughed together. Richard got to get even one more time, pull the covers. We had a little thing we used to say, we're really glad you came, Richard. The kids and I would say to him, we're really glad you came, we're really glad you stayed. So here he is dying on this bed, and he's getting this morphine because I'm giving it to him. And families all around, we're holding hands. We're crying. I say, Richard, we're really glad you came. He raised his head right up and he said, I said, are you? And he said, no. And the whole room, it burst into laughter. He burst into laughter. The tears are coming. The laughter's coming. You could feel the presence and the Spirit of God all around. And this was how we got to end our time together. There isn't a single thing that's happened in my life that hasn't been a direct result of the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and the people who share with us. The thing that God gave us that I'm most absolute grateful for, and so are you, is that if all we had was a book, we wouldn't have a whole lot. But we have each other. We can touch each other. We can see each other. We can hear each other. We get to be angry with each other and have all kinds of resentments. I've really had some good resentments in this program. But these people who don't understand me and are very critical. And I've learned that, these things like, when you got noisy people in a meeting, as long as I'm making the noise, it doesn't bother me, and as soon as I clean up my act, I'm mad at them. Over and over again it happens. And all this stuff I learned from you guys. I learned if I don't like what you're doing, I've either done it, I am doing it, or I'm about to do it. And now that I'm as old as I am, I always say, please God, let it be in the past. I don't want to start this again. So it's kind of a full circle. I've got a daughter who's 31 years sober in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. These guys, when they did this beautiful job of doing the concepts, and Jennifer with the 12th tradition, it was just beautiful. Never seen a meeting done that way before, and I'm really impressed. I'm impressed a lot with the people in Salt Lake City in the programs. I have been since I first came here. I'm impressed with the community and the love and the caring of Alcoholics Anonymous. I love being with you. I come a lot. I always go to a lot of meetings. I have a lot of family here. I rarely raise my hand as a visitor when I come here because I'm not. And you've given me my family. And you've given me an understanding of God so much better than the one I had. And no matter what I'm walking with, angers or rages or hurts or pains or death, we've had some of those in the family. Some pretty tough ones. There's never been a question in my mind that God wasn't walking with me. Never been a question. And so I'm comforted with that. So I have a phone and I can reach you, and I have God and I can reach that spirit within. And I'm a blessed woman. Thank you very much for your part of it.